So again, Shabbat Shalom. I know we've been talking a lot these past few weeks about vaccine distribution here in Canada, and it is easy for us to feel frustrated. We all have worries about the production levels of the European factories that we're relying upon and the planning competence of our federal government. And I think we regret a bit the inability of our Canadian factories to produce a national supply of vaccine. All of these feelings are valid, especially when we know that the vaccine is the best way for us to come out of this pandemic that is now reaching its weary 1-year anniversary. But there's another response that I know is easy for us to feel, and I think is worthy for us to examine in our hearts this Shabbat. It is a human response we are warned about in our parashat Yitro, in which, as I mentioned earlier, we receive the 10 Commandments. And it is a warning of the very last of the 10 Commandments, the commandment not to covet. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's vaccine. Very easy for us to look across the border to the US and hear from our friends and family receiving their first and even second shots. All the more so as we look to Israel, where next week they will open vaccination to all Israelis over the age of 16. When we read in the news about vaccine distribution in those other countries, do we recognize maybe a little bit an impulse within ourselves to covet that which we do not yet have access to? Do we want what others have and to keep it for ourselves? The English word covet always strikes me as being a term that is hard to define. There's always been a tension in trying to understand its meaning. Either it might be about an attitude or an action. That is to say, does coveting something in our hearts, but maybe not acting upon it, count as a transgression against God? Numerous sages struggle with this notion and suggest that in order for the commandment to make sense, the Torah must be referring to the physical actions that might manifest themselves as a result of someone coveting their neighbor. A classical biblical case is that of King Ahab, who was covetous of his neighbor's vineyard, and when the latter refused to sell it to him, as it belonged to his family, Ahab had him killed. Or indeed, King David's behavior when it came to his relationship with the married Bathsheba. He had her husband brought to the front lines to be killed in battle, so that she could be his, David's wife. It seems unlikely that people today would take their covetous desire to such a degree and cheat or steal their way into obtaining a vaccine. We all know that such action is not only unlikely, but would be met with societal scorn, like it was for our neighbors, the BC couple who snuck their way into getting vaccinated in the Yukon. Rather, most of us face the flip side of coveting, which is all about attitude. If I look with jealousy at my cousin or uncle being vaccinated in Florida or Tel Aviv, am I breaking the 10th commandment? Is it really considered coveting if one doesn't act upon their feelings? Some rabbis and scholars say that coveting means what it sounds like, the internal state of desiring something that belongs to someone else. While coveting may well lead to taking, it does not denote it. With this last of the 10 Commandments, the Torah is reaching inward, beyond our actions and into our inner life and the motivations that animate our behavior in the world. And yet, the more prevalent idea within Judaism is that yearning for something in the heart, without taking an action that would surely be a transgression, is not coveting. and can actually be for the good. It is said that 2,000 years ago, a group of rabbis encountered the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, amidst the destruction of Jerusalem. Knowing that the evil impulse was to blame for the devastation of the destruction of the Holy Temple, they grabbed this Yetzer Hara and wrestled him into a chamber pot where they held him. They were ready to destroy this evil impulse, but one rabbi interjected and said, "Who knows what will happen if you destroy him? Hold him for 3 days and see what happens." The rabbis waited patiently for 3 days and then began looking around the city of Jerusalem. Immediately, they noticed that the world was beginning to rot away. People stopped doing business. Chickens stopped producing eggs. Families stopped building houses. Immediately, they knew what they had to do. They let him go, knowing that the world could not be sustained without him. It's a truly radical story. Our ancestors acknowledged that the engine of the world is not our quest toward good, but rather our selfishness. Our impulses for personal advancement or self-interest, and to privilege ourselves and our family over others, may indeed bring problems into the world, but can also move it forward. Since we rarely have truly altruistic motives, sometimes the Yetzer Hara is the push that we need to actualize our most full selves. The 10th commandment must not be commanding us to obliterate our Yetzer Hara, for that would be both impossible and inadvisable. Our task, I believe, instead is to redirect that inclination to do good. I believe that we should seek to transform our covetous desire to have a vaccine into more positive outcomes. And so to that end, I suggest 3 ways of reframing our thinking about our desire for a vaccine right now. First, let us transform our personal desire into collective desire. We've all heard stories about vaccine skeptics. But the only way that vaccination works to stop the spread of a virus is by having a large majority of the population take the vaccine and establish herd immunity. If we can transform the Yetzer Hara, the inclination that makes us want to have a vaccine for ourselves and our family, into an inclination that helps us create a broader desire for the vaccine on a societal level, that is actually for the health and benefit of all people, and a very good thing indeed. Second, let us transform our desire into action. For many of us, when we get the call for a vaccine appointment, we will run as fast as possible. But there are many who have mobility and other challenges that will make getting to vaccine appointments difficult. We can shift our energy that we recognize in our alacrity, our willingness to get the vaccine, into acts that we can take to support those around us to be ready to go as well. We can make sure that our friends and neighbors, especially our seniors, understand how to make appointments. We can help to arrange driving and check in and follow up after the shots to see how people are feeling. And finally, let us transform our desire into compassion. We should remember this feeling of what it felt like to want so desperately to have good vaccine distribution in Canada once those shots are in our arms. Surely we know that there are countries in the world, and the developing world in particular, who will be waiting long after us. And we can use our awareness of what it feels like to be without to ensure the continued distribution to all the peoples of the world. We are blessed in so many ways to live in this country, and our sense of gratitude for our blessings should not be kept inside our borders. Indeed, the 10th commandment, like the very first one, I am Adonai your God, can be read not as a commandment at all, but rather a warning. Beware the evil inclination. We are instructed to pay attention to our Yetzer Hara, to guard against its leading us astray. Those who are most punctilious in observing, you shall not covet, will turn unhealthy desires to good use, improving our own lives, repairing the world, and serving God. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May it be so. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Shakal.